Hello there, welcome to History 101, where I'm going to be giving you some background information to famous historical characters and events, just to try and whet your appetite to go out there and do a bit of research by yourself. There's a huge amount of information on the internet and no excuse for not getting out there and dipping your toes in some fantastic history. So today we're going to start with Henry VIII. Here he is. He was born in 1491. He was the third child of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. He was their second son, their first being Arthur. Henry became king in 1509. His older brother had died by this time, age 15. Here is Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Henry, famous of course for marrying 6 wives, divorcing 2 and beheading 2. This is Catherine, as I say. She was previously married to Henry's brother Arthur and had been married to him since she was 3. Arthur died at the age of 15. Henry obtained papal dispensation to marry Catherine because of course she'd been married to his brother, and even in those day and ages that was a bit dodgy. So she is originally Spanish. She came over in a perilous journey from by sea, of course, and it is said that Henry did love Catherine and they were married for some 20 years. But of course it couldn't last. Catherine had produced, over their period of 20 years, only one surviving child, which was of course Mary I, no sons at all. Henry was convinced that this was because she had previously been married to his brother. So he asked the Pope for an annulment of the marriage. Of course the Pope refused, and then began the great saga of Henry cutting off ties with Rome and declaring England a Protestant country to get his marriage annulled. Of course this was devastating to Catherine, who was a staunch Catholic, and he treated her very poorly from this point on, really, in my opinion, obviously. This beautiful lady is Anne Boleyn, who Henry had become enamoured with at some point in his marriage to Catherine. Of course, she was a very smart cookie. She refused to become involved with him until she was his wife. And in 1533, they got married, when allegedly Anne was already pregnant with Henry's child. Of course, she gives birth, and it's another girl, which is, of course, the future Queen Elizabeth I. Everybody was hopeful that this might mean more children and eventually a son. Here she is again, beautiful Anne Boleyn, but she didn't have any more children. Unfortunately, all pregnancies ended in miscarriage. Henry was by now desperate for a son because, of course, the crown could only pass to a son in these days. And on trumped-up charges of adultery, Anne was arrested and subjected to trial and later on beheaded at the Tower of London on the 19th of May. This is the lovely Jane Seymour, who Henry married in 1536. She was, it is said, to be the one that Henry really loved. She very quickly became pregnant and, of course, gave birth to a son, Edward. Henry VIII was devastated when Jane died shortly after the birth, which was not uncommon in those days. She was given a state funeral and buried at Windsor Castle. This is Anne of Cleves. She was Henry's 4th wife. In 1538, Henry was on the lookout for another wife because, of course, he still needed a son. As the saying goes, you need an heir and a spare. He had Edward, but, you know, the more the merrier. It was very unusual for children to survive to adulthood in those days. So he sent off his greatest portrait artist, which is Hans Holbein the Younger, to paint portraits of prospective wives for Henry to get involved in. Henry was given a portrait of Anne, which he actually fell in love with, and he decided to meet her. Unfortunately, when she arrived, it turns out she was actually nothing like the portrait that he had been given, and he was not impressed. He felt that he had been conned into marrying her on the basis of a portrait which looked nothing like her. I believe the expression is he complained that she looked like a horse. So that marriage didn't last, and of course he was divorced from Anne of Cleves. This is This is a portrait from the National Museums in Liverpool by William Lindsay Windus. It's a picture of Cranmer, Thomas Cranmer, trying to obtain a confession of guilt from Henry's fifth wife, which was the lovely Catherine Howard, who it was alleged had had a previous relationship with a courtier from Henry's court and had an affair with a Thomas Culpeper, which was of course adulterous and treacherous, and she was convicted of adultery and treason and executed in 1542. Henry had waited just three weeks after his annulment of marriage came from Anne of Cleves to marry Catherine, who was Anne's lady in waiting. So not a good outcome for poor old Catherine. This is Henry's sixth wife, Catherine Parr. She was twice widowed by the time she met Henry, and they married in 1543. Catherine Parr was a really good foil for Henry. She was kind to his existing children. She was aware of Henry's temper and sympathetic with him over his problems. She recognised, really, I think, that it was better for her if she could just keep her head down and survive, basically. She helped the king reconcile with his daughters Mary and Elizabeth, who had been estranged from to a certain degree, obviously treating neither of their mothers particularly well. She made sure that both children got an education. She was sympathetic with Protestants. She was a Protestant, which was probably the one thing she did not agree with Henry on, but she tempered his fury, and she managed to outlive the king, which was a tremendous achievement, really. He died in 1547, and she then went on to marry her fourth husband, Sir Thomas Seymour. So there he is, a big man himself, famous for all sorts of bad things, really. His way of dealing with people who got in his way was to execute them, so he's definitely one to avoid angering. So that's it for our Henry VIII. If you've liked this video, please like it and subscribe, and if you'd like me to cover something in particular, then please let me know in the comments. So I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.